You know, in a quiet little corner of northern Japan, there's a story that kind of gently unwinds everything you thought you knew about one of history's most famous people. It's a tale not set in the Middle East, but in the Far East. And it's not about a short life, but a very, very long one. We're going to talk about the Japanese Jesus. So our journey really begins right here, with this sign. It stands in the tiny village of Shingo, and it makes a claim that is so extraordinary it honestly feels like it's from another dimension. It says that not only did Jesus live and die in Japan, but that the person crucified in his place was actually his younger brother, Isukiri.
Okay, so what's going on here? This isn't just some simple myth. It's a lot more like an onion, right? It's got all these layers of history, religion, and even politics, all wrapped around this really strange core. So in this explainer, we're going to peel them back one by one to figure out where this incredible legend even came from.
Right, so the first layer, the outside of the onion, it's the most tangible part, the place itself. In this village, Shingo, there are two simple burial mounds that have become a small but surprisingly popular tourist spot known as Christ's Tomb.
Now, the traditional gospel story is, well, it's familiar to millions of people. But the Shingo legend, it's a completely different path. I mean, instead of crucifixion at age 33, it tells of a man who escapes, makes his way back to Japan, and lives out his days as a garlic farmer, dying peacefully at the ripe old age of 106. These two stories just could not be more different. So you have to ask, where did this wild alternate version even come from?
Well, the source of this legend isn't some ancient folklore that's been passed down for generations. It's actually something way more recent and a lot more controversial. It all comes from a set of documents that just appeared in the 1930s, claiming they held the world's true history.
They were called the Takeuchi, or sometimes Takeuchi, documents. And they weren't just about Jesus. No, they claimed to be the complete secret history of all of humanity, written down from a divine language. And they revealed a past that was far grander and frankly a lot stranger than anything you'd find in a history book.
And at the absolute center of these extraordinary claims was one man, the person who brought this entire story to the world. His name was Kiyomaru Takeuchi. He was the founder of his own new religious movement. And his claim was that these incredible texts had been passed down through his family for centuries, preserving the real history that, powerful forces had tried to suppress.
And this is where this story just blows up. The tale of Jesus in Japan. It turns out that was just a tiny footnote in a much, much larger and way more ambitious mythology that these documents laid out.
So according to these documents, Japan was the center of everything. A line of world emperors ruled a global empire from Japan, and they traveled around in ancient flying ships. And get this, all the world's great prophets, we're talking Moses, Buddha, Muhammad, and of course Jesus, they all came to Japan to study. The documents even claim that the tomb of Moses is also in Japan.
Now, you might be thinking these claims are just eccentric fantasies, right? Harmless fun. But in the hyper-nationalist world of 1930s Imperial Japan, they were politically dangerous. See, Takeuchi wasn't just telling a new story. He was directly challenging the government's official version of history.
The government's power was built on an official history, one that established the emperor's divine lineage. But Takeuchi's documents presented a totally competing history, one that reframed the Japanese emperor, not just as a national ruler, but as the rightful heir to a prehistoric global throne. He was essentially saying, your version is a fake, I have the real story.
And the government, well, they saw this as a direct threat. This official denunciation from 1936 accuses Takeuchi's group of defaming the imperial dignity and spreading dreadful heresies. His ideas weren't just a fantasy anymore, they were a crime.
So how does a story that was considered a national threat become a quirky tourist attraction? That is the final, and maybe the strangest, layer of this whole story.
The legend's survival is almost as bizarre as its creation. Takeuchi was arrested.
The government confiscated the original documents, only for them to be completely destroyed in the firebombings of World War II. But the story itself, it just refused to die. By 1964, the village of Shingo, needing some visitors, decided to lean into the legend and created a Christ festival that still happens today.
So today, what started as a sacred text has basically become a beloved local oddity. About 20,000 people visit every year, drawn in by just how improbable the whole thing is. The dangerous heresy of the 1930s has been totally transformed into the quirky heritage and, let's be honest, the main tourist draw of a small Japanese town. So we're left with this question, a story that was created to rewrite world history, to challenge an entire empire, now sells coffee mugs and brings a little bit of fame to a remote village. It really makes you wonder what the true power of a story is. Is it the grand vision of its creator, or is it the simple, strange little life it ends up taking on in the world?